Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's town hall, conducting hazard assessments and identifying MSD risks. This is the second in a series of virtual events that we created for the Msd Pledge community following the official launch of the Msd Pledge in June, designed to strengthen your ability to identify and reduce risks of MSD injuries and create safer workplaces. My name is Corinne Towler. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the director of the MSD Solutions Lab at the National Safety Council. It is my privilege to serve as your host for an information-packed hour with several expert speakers. Before we begin today's program, I really want to take a moment to thank each of you for taking time to join us virtually from all over the country and outside the US as well. Now to today's agenda. After my introduction, Velocity EHS's Director of Research and Ergonomics Engineer, Blake McGowan, will share an overview of some innovations and technology that help with the understanding and tracking of MSDs. Following that, we're excited to bring you a moderated conversation led by Malcolm Glenn from Meteorite to discuss some specific advances in MSD assessment. He'll be joined by Kevin Mcclary, who serves as the Vice President of Risk Management, Premium Audit and Agency Services at Amerisure, and Kathy Spanger, who serves as the North America Ergonomics Subject Matter Expert at Schneider Electric. During the moderated conversation part of today's program, we'll ask for all of you to drop your questions into the Zoom Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Malcolm will make sure we're able to get as many of your questions covered as we can before we complete today's event at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Before I turn the mic over to Blake, I'd like to take a brief moment to review the Msd Pledge for any of you who haven't had the chance to sign it yet. An initiative of the MSD Solutions Lab here at NSC, the pledge is a first of its kind industry call to action, meant to unite organizations across the globe in our mission to eliminate these pervasive workplace injuries. So far, more than 100 organizations have signed the pledge, from Ansel and Genentech to Little and Wayfair. By signing the MSD Pledge, organizations commit to analyze the cause of MSD injuries and invest in solutions and practices which reduce risks to workers, leverage best practices and share learnings to improve safety practices, build a culture of safety where everyone at every level is accountable for the safety and health of workers, and of course, the goal of our work together, ultimately to reduce MSD risk and resulting in injuries across our entire pledge community by 25% by the year 2025. Together, we strive to create safer outcomes for millions of workers worldwide. Signing the MSD Pledge is completely free, and organizations that take that step gain access to a wealth of resources to advance their safety programs, such as the event you're participating in today. Please visit nsc.org/MSD Pledge to learn more and sign up with us. We hope you'll join us in this important work. Our goal for today's event is to give you tools to strengthen your ability to identify and reduce risks of MSD injuries and create safer workplaces. For today's discussion, I'm so pleased to welcome Blake McGowan, one of the country's foremost experts on MSDs. He serves as the Director of Ergonomics Research at Velocity EHS, where he leads the Ergonomics Research Group to incorporate the latest technical and scientific data into human tech ergonomics software solutions. Additionally, he consults with academia to transfer current research knowledge into the company's approach, systems, assessment methods, and guidelines. And he's a great friend of the MSD Lab, and just thrilled to have you with us. Blake, on to you.
Great. Thanks, Corinne. I really appreciate that introduction, as well as I appreciate the opportunity to speak with this group today and share a little bit of information about musculoskeletal disorders, as well as the MSD Pledge. And for those of you that are new to the MSD Pledge, I would highly recommend that you consider your company joining and participating in the pledge. It is a tremendous benefit for your organization to be part of that. So today I'm very happy to kind of introduce and kick off this town hall meeting. And then introduce the two most important people of this session, both Kathy and Kevin, to get into the fireside chat and really get into some details. But just to kind of set the table for today's session, I just wanted to remind everyone, maybe provide a little bit of a framework. This part of the discussion is about technology. And I always like to ask people what the definition of technology is. And sometimes I'm taken back. When we think of technology, we think typically of devices or gadgets or equipment. But the true definition of technology is the application of scientific knowledge for practical purposes. So technology has been around for a long time. It's just in a different format now than it might have been in the past. So it's always good to level set with regards to what we mean by technology. The other area is definitions. And just for today's session, we're really focusing on musculoskeletal disorder risk. So the risk of developing an injury in the workplace, rather than ergonomic design. And ergonomics I define as defining the workplace characteristics to match human performance capabilities. Both are equally important. I would say they're somewhat separate topics. And today we're focusing on MSD risk and risk reduction. Everything always comes down to fundamentals when we're trying to solve a problem. And that's kind of point two. We need to focus on those fundamentals and not get distracted by maybe the shiny technology or the shiny outputs of things. And we need to understand what are those true fundamentals of addressing musculoskeletal disorders. And the risks of developing that in the workplace kind of fall into three categories. The biological risk factors, the psychological risk factors, as well as the sociological risk factors. And typically when we talk about MSD risk, we're focusing on the biological risk factors and more specifically, those physical risk factors. So research does show that the primary risk factors or physical risk factors for the development of an MSD are things like exertion, forceful exertions, awkward postures, long durations, repetition, as well as things as vibration and temperature. So we always want to go back to the fundamentals and say, what are we really trying to measure to solve the problem? And that transitions into the third point, which is, technology can help us solve a problem, but technology is not always the answer to the problem. It's just a method of doing it. So we really need to understand what problem are we trying to solve. Now, in the world of MSD risk reduction, there are several highly validated and accurate risk assessment tools, but you need to apply them properly. So for example, if you are trying to address an issue where you have forceful exertions in the hands and wrist area, we would recommend something like the ACGIH hand activity tool to help you solve that problem by quantifying the risk as well as trying to measure that risk reduction following a solution being implemented. Now, if it's more of an upper extremity problem, maybe something like the strain index might be the better tool. If it's for pushing, pulling, maybe it's the Snook and Seriello tables. For lifting, to determine the acceptability, maybe it's the NIOSH lifting equation. There are also many other tools that are very specific to a country or region, like the key indicator method out of Germany. And there's other examples of good tools to help you solve a problem. But it's important that they focus on those fundamentals and they actually allow you to solve that problem. The fourth point, I think I mentioned already, is the technology can be an enabler, but it also can be a distractor. So making sure that your technology is founded in all this science and actually allows you to maybe collect data better, work more quickly, or help you solve a problem. Now, one of the challenges we have currently in the field of MSD risk reduction is the majority of the risk assessment tools that are out there and validated are developed for people to conduct using manual visual observation. So they have all these, biases or kind of assumptions put in that someone's going to have to do this. So they're typically simple. And there's an opportunity as we start to introduce more technology, we can introduce more complex risk assessment tools and measure things that we're not able to measure with visual observation. For example, things like acceleration have been determined to be a primary risk factor, but it's very difficult for someone to visually see acceleration. But technology can help us with that. And lastly, the fifth point before I share a little bit of technology is, the technology should give you some level of actual insights. It's not just about measuring data. We need to have outcomes from that. So I always like to ask about a technology is, does it measure the right data? Does it then give us good information that's validated and repeatable and accurate? Does that lead to understanding more about the problem, such as giving us more knowledge? But most importantly, does it provide us with some type of actual insight to improve that problem? And we need to get away from something I was introduced to maybe 25 years ago by Stu McGill, my professor in graduate school, is DRIP. And it's called Data Rich Information Poor. And there are a lot of tools out there in technology that provide a tremendous amount of data. They're very rich in data, but very limited in information. So it's shiny, it's new, and exciting, but does it actually focus on those fundamentals that allow you to solve the problem? So next slide. So I just want to share with you an example of some of the technologies that are available in the market to help you solve problems faster with better quality. This is an example of some computer vision that is available in the market that allows you to conduct an MSD risk assessment with, I would say, higher quality and assess things at more complexity, but also can allow you to do this at scale and speed. So being able to take advantage of this technology will allow us to conduct these assessments, train people less, but get better data, scale it more. And it's just an opportunity for us to maybe elevate the type of information that we're taking away from a risk assessment, introducing more complex things, as I mentioned, like acceleration. So hopefully that was a useful introduction, because the best part of this session is going to be the conversation between Kevin and Kathy. So I will now pass the ball over to my two colleagues on this call.
Blake, thanks for taking us through that demonstration and talking about the tech we can utilize to mitigate and track MSDs in the workplace. Now, I would like to introduce Malcolm Glenn, a senior advisor with our partners at Meteorite, who will be leading our fireside chat.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Corinne. And thank you to Blake for that wonderful introduction to today's conversation. And most importantly, thank you to all of you for joining today. I'm really excited to be leading the next conversation where we're going to dig a little bit deeper into what really goes into quality MSD solutions programs. As Corinne said, my name is Malcolm Glenn, and I'm a senior advisor at Meteorite. And I'm also the founder and CEO of MG Equity Consulting, which is a firm that helps organizations really embed equity in everything they do, inside and out. And I'm so pleased to be joining a conversation alongside Blake, and also to be joined by two experts in their fields. Both have decades of experience in safety, ergonomics, and injury prevention. I'll quickly introduce them both, and then, as Blake said, we will spend most of the time hearing from them throughout the rest of our conversation. So first up, we have Kevin Mcclary, who's the Vice President of Risk Management, Premium Audit, and Agency Services for Amerisure Mutual Insurance Company. In this role, he's responsible for risk management and premium audit operations in all of Amerisure's licensed states. He joined Amerisure in 1998 as a loss control consultant. And throughout his tenure, he's served as loss control manager of Amerisure's Midwest region, as an assistant vice president of the Midwest region, assistant vice president of the Southeast region, and vice president of risk management. Kevin, we're so excited for you to be here. Welcome.
Thank you.
We're also, of course, thank you. And we're also joined by Kathy Spanger, who has had more than 30 years of experience in the safety and ergonomics fields, working in meatpacking, direct mail distribution, and for the past 18 or so years, working in the industrial setting of miniature circuit breaker assembly and fabrication of plastic and metal parts at the Lincoln Schneider electric plant. She retired in June of 2020, but she continues to work for Schneider Electric, now in the role of ergonomic subject matter expert for NAM. Kevin, Kathy, and Blake as well, because we're going to continue to hear from him. Thank you all for joining us. But before we dive in, I just want to say to everyone who's tuned in, please, please, please do submit any questions you might have for anyone you've heard from today via that Q&A box. I will keep my eye on those questions. And as has been mentioned, we'll do our best to get to as many of them later as we possibly can. Okay, so let's dive into the conversation. So you just heard from Blake about some of the innovative ways to leverage technology for tracking MSD injuries and workplace risks. So maybe I can start with you, Blake and Kevin. Could you both describe what some of the leading and lagging indicators are that you see when you look at the data for MSDs? Kevin, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, no problem. Well, first, let me just say, I wanted to start with the concept of leading indicators, because then I'm going to just use a brief example for the group. And it really is the idea of SMART, right? So for leading indicators, think about SMART as the acronym for specific, measurable, accountable, reasonable, and timely, okay? And so if we take the idea of our goal is to reduce MSDs, and some of those actions that we're going to do to meet that goal, right, are participation in MSD training, conducting MSD assessments, how many corrective actions have been identified through the employee committee. Those are some of the examples within that kind of SMART framework that are leading indicators for MSD injuries. Blake, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a wonderful start there, Kevin. Both leading as well as lagging indicators are value added. Sometimes we get into this discussion of, leading is better and lagging is not as important. I don't think they're mutually exclusive in that way. I think both can help us provide a picture of where we're at and help us tell a story of moving forward. With regards to things like the leading indicators, activity indicators are very, very important, the initial parts of a deployment, and then we can start to get into more of the hard quantifiable leading indicators like MSD risk levels and risk reduction as initiatives get more, mature. And it is always important to make sure that we have those lagging indicators, but also it has to be high quality lagging indicators. Too many times I'll do a review or an audit of lagging indicators, and the data could have been better, and it does make it difficult for us to make a good decision. So both are equally important and should be part of your initiative, not one or the other, but both.
I really appreciate that. I love that SMART acronym, Kevin, that you just threw out there. Do you mind just actually repeating what each of those letters stands for, just so folks make sure they have it?
Absolutely. SMART, the acronym is specific, measurable, accountable, reasonable, and timely.
I love that. I hope folks can take that away from today's conversation with them, because I think that's really, really useful and a really easy way to remember what to keep in mind when they're thinking about these indicators. Kathy, maybe we can turn to you. So I understand that Schneider Electric is leaning into a lot of these innovations. Can you tell us a little bit about the systems that Schneider Electric has in place to track some of these metrics?
Yes, I would love to. And I want to echo your comments, though, about Kevin's SMART performance description or whatever. I think that's very good. And I also agree with Blake on you need both leading and lagging indicators. Right. I think we would be remiss if we'd say, that the final statistics are not important, because that's what's going to tell you whether you've been successful or not. But when we're looking at leading indicators at Schneider, we're focusing on our metrics answering for us how much risk is at the work site, and then secondarily, how effective are the on-site teams at reducing this risk. So we've come up with two processes that we utilize that seem to be effective. We're just getting going on this because our focus on ergonomics has just recently pumped up when I was able to go into this role. But we utilize what we call an ergonomic dashboard. We're using MS Teams channels, and we have spreadsheets in there that the sites are to fill out. And this is for about a third of our employees, as I had mentioned, in North America. So 36 sites. I'm able to go in and look at their dashboard, and I'm going to describe some of the elements of it, but they're all a series of leading indicators that we feel are giving us an idea of whether our risk is reducing or not. For one thing, these sites have to track completed assessments. These assessments show me what percent of their assessments are in the low, medium, high, or very high categories. So we put them in risk profiles. So we can go in and look at a site and say, wow, in January, 60% of your assessments were showing you at high or very high risk, but the efforts that you've made now have brought those down. You're now more at 20% still in the high or very high. So it gives us a very clear picture of their progress. They also have to track the action plans that are associated with those assessments. So if they identify something in a high or very high risk, then of course we want them to do something about it. And so they track, what the action is, when it is completed, who is responsible for it, et cetera. And this also will show us a real nice graph from month to month. We also track early discomfort reports, not in any way in an effort to decrease early discomfort reports. We actually feel that the more people are reporting, and the sooner they are reporting, obviously, the better. So it's music to my ears when I see that a site's getting a lot of reports, particularly if they're new reports. You never want to hear somebody say, yeah, I've had shoulder pain for 6 months, but it's very, feels a sense of accomplishment when you hear them say, yes, I've had, my fingers have been tingling for 3 days and I wanted to let you know. Good, thank you for letting us know, because then we can do something about it. By tracking these early discomfort reports, we can track by department, by supervisor, which body parts are, seem to be showing up most frequently, whether this is work related or not work related, because that's important. We feel it's very important to treat a non-work related almost identical to what we would a work related issue, because we all know that eventually a non-work related issue can become work related. We track number of days to resolution, et cetera. So at the end, this dashboard is exactly what you would think of as a dashboard. It's got individual graphs, very bright and cheery, give you a lot of information showing your progress, month by month. Then the sites can take that information, share it with their top management, with their plant managers, with the Ergo team, with the employees, to show them that some of their efforts are definitely working. And then one other thing real quickly, we're rolling out a 36 question survey this month, and I'm calling it the Ergo Program Maturity Profile. And it covers 6 categories. And so there's like 6 questions roughly in each one. And the categories include leadership and policy, teams and training, data management and process review, risk assessment, engineering and administrative controls, and discomfort management. And the point is, as the sites answer this profile, I'll be able to get a very good grip on the program health, telling me whether they're mature or they need some work. So that will help me focus on that. So in essence, the survey results themselves will act as leading indicators, because it'll help me develop the next steps to move forward. That's it.
Thank you so much, Kathy. That is so useful, and I think such a great indication of the value prop that comes with the dashboard that you described so well. If I can just quickly ask you a follow-up question. I understand that you personally championed the effort at Schneider Electric to implement these systems. So maybe you could just quickly tell us, why do you believe these systems were so important?
Oh, great question. I've been passionate about ergonomics ever since I got into safety, which, as was very pointedly pointed out, decades and decades ago. But I worked in direct mail advertising and meat packing, which are 2 very high-risk ergonomic industries. And it became very apparent to me that we need to obviously address ergonomics. Well, since moving to Schneider in an automated facility, you might think I don't have any ergo issues. Well, we certainly do, because there's even though assembly is primarily automated, you have all your peripheral departments, people that are picking things up and doing inspections and quality work, and all the things that go on that we like to pretend are not going on and put on our blinders, but they are. So MSDs continue to be our number one injury. Back in 2007, Schneider implemented a 26-pound weight limit for all manufacturing sites at Schneider Electric. And North America is the one that actually embraced this. And boy, there was some head shaking going on. They did not believe that we were going to try to get to 26 pounds lifting maximum limit. And we were able to do that. It's 40 pounds for our DCs. So also at that time, Schneider came out with some ergonomic design training. So the interest was there. Unfortunately, they did not have anybody to drive that. They did not have a role where somebody was going around to the plants making sure this was getting done. So it was very hit or miss. So I got really involved in this. I tried to take on Ergo while I was a safety manager at the Lincoln, Nebraska plant. That didn't work out so good. It's very difficult to have a very full-time job and then try to take on another massive job. So we really weren't successful until I retired and came back. But I am just, we've got people that are hurting. I've seen people hurting in other industries. So obviously we need to continue to make progress.
Well, Kathy, I just want to say thank you for sharing a little bit about your personal approach and your perspective and your experience around this issue. And I think you've made a great case about why it's so important to make this a point of emphasis from a company perspective. But I recognize that there are also some companies that might be tuning in and saying, gosh, this is a significant investment. And so, Kevin, maybe this next question can be for you. For companies that might not be ready to invest in advanced technologies for tracking MSDs and related risks, are there other reliable assessment tools that AmeriSure recommends as a proactive approach?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question, Malcolm. Well, first of all, I'd be remiss in saying that one of the best resource libraries that anybody can access is the National Safety Council. They have tons of great information, and certainly under this new Msd Pledge initiative, additional information that companies from all over the country are contributing to. But to get to the main point of your question, right, which is actually what we service, the types of customers that we service in commercial insurance, commercial businesses out in the United States are typically less sophisticated. They're not the Amazons. They're not the, Lear Jets or what Lear type corporations. So what I would say is, you don't try to boil the ocean, right? And I have a saying I always say, I don't know if I like it or not, but stop the bleeding, right? So involve your frontline employees. You don't have to have this big infrastructure of 12 safety people, ergonomics and things like that. It's great if you can, but most people in their organizations just can't afford that or have that type of structure. So right? So what do you want to do? You want to engage your frontline managers. You want to engage your frontline employees and really stop the bleeding, meaning start with one area, start with one job process, and really attempt to identify corrective actions for that. And then I think that after you do that, you can easily move on to your next thing, and you can get assessments online. There is tons of resources in terms of ergonomic assessments, MSD assessments online that you can utilize as well. The one thing I think is real important that a lot of people forget about in terms of if they're not, for lack of a better way to say it, sophisticated size, that type of thing. And I'm the insurance guy on this panel, so I'll say is access your insurance carrier. And I'm not just talking about AmeriSure, that'd be great, but I'm talking about whoever your commercial insurance carrier is, if you're in a commercial business, because right now they are offering a lot of technologies, assessments. Really, assessments should be part of their everyday, kind of their general service to you as a commercial business. But on the other end of really cutting edge technologies, wearables, the visual type assessment that Blake showed at the beginning, with the stick, the green red figure and things like that. Insurance companies are providing a lot of that technology today free of charge to policyholders, because they're attempting to figure out, the insurance companies, where the real value is in this emerging technology. So as a policyholder, less sophisticated account, smaller account that doesn't have the infrastructure, they can be a great partner in this process with you, whether it be just basic, come out, help you assess your workplace, or really give you access to some real cutting edge technology that you probably wouldn't have available to you specifically as a company.
Those are phenomenally useful tools. And I think for everyone tuning in, I think they've probably found something already to latch onto that they can start to implement into their own workplace. I think one of the challenges comes in terms of thinking kind of who within the organization is responsible for that. So for example, we know that managers are a critical part of leading and representing workplace values, including, of course, values around MSD safety. So Kevin, maybe we can actually stay with you here. Mm-hmm. What are some strategies that you recommend to support managers specifically as leaders in MSD hazard assessments and safety solutions?
Yeah, absolutely, Malcolm. So I would really break it down into the kind of two sections. One is goal, and this is going to set up to enable your managers, right? So you have to have a goal, right? To empower your managers, your leaders, you have to have a goal, right? And what is that goal? Is it a reduction, and let's just make it up, 50% reduction in MSD injuries? Let's just say that. So right, that's our goal. Right. So to really get that within the culture, to have our managers, breathing, thinking about it at all time, is one, you're helping your managers and your frontline employee, you're helping you develop your goal. But that next step then is having the managers and frontline employees with senior management develop those actions. What are going to be the expectations of the managers, of your leaders on the floor, in the field, whatever, and then how are they, right? And then you have that buy-in from the employee as well as you're developing those actions, right? The actions of training, the actions of hazard assessments, different things like that. That really starts that buy-in, and it gives you a foundation of to come back to, right? Of, hey, our goal is this. Here's the actions we agreed upon. And we can hold that. And as we talked about earlier, Blake and I, you start getting, and then you get to some of those leading indicators, some of those lagging indicators, because you do have action, you have a goal and some actions that the manager can support and have a clear vision when they're communicating with their employees. And then lastly, but certainly not least, is we built it. Sorry about that. I gave Malcolm a false start there. A great document really is, and we kind of build around this webinar, is the NSC Conversation Guide for Managers. I highly recommend that as well. It feeds right into what I'm talking about right now and gives them some good real life examples of how to address specific situations.
Kevin, I'm never going to get upset at you for giving more tips and more tools. So thank you for helping increasingly enrich the audience by sharing more than even I anticipated. I think that's really, really useful. Kathy, maybe I can ask you a little bit of a follow-up. In your mind, what are some of the MSD risk assessment tools that you offer for managers at Schneider Electric in particular to help them support safety conversations with their teams?
Okay, well, we typically assess design. Blake talked about that. Design isn't what we're talking about today, but one of the assessments that we have is very specifically related to our ergo design training, where we talk about, reaches and weights and forces and how much they're, can be applied. We also, of course, identify MSD risk, and we use something quite similar to what Blake has described. But Kevin is right. You can go online and you can get umpteen different job assessments, and there's a lot out there. So if you're a smaller company or one that's just starting your journey, don't feel that you have to go after a certain specific one. We use something called a job screen, which again identifies the different risks for 9 different body parts, but there's also some smaller ones that that can be done, utilized. For instance, just training your employees to go out and do a Gemba walk and look for red flags. You know, teach them what is a red flag. Well, it's somebody that's having to work with their arms up in the air or bent over or their neck looking up and different things like that. Because those smaller, easier to perform ones make it really easy then for your site to get involved in using them. The simpler they are, the more often they're going to be used. We've got some unique offers. We've collaborated with Ergo Plus, who happens to be our primary vendor for ergonomics at Schneider. We've created an Office Ergo Toolkit, which is a very simple way for the sites who maybe don't have an injury prevention specialist on site to help their people in an office setting. They can go in and they take training and they assess their own office, and it will actually give them a response saying, hey, great job, your monitor height looks like it's good, but we would suggest that you move your mouse a little bit closer to yourself, or whatever it happens to be. And then the important thing is also, if they need additional help, they can just click a button and get some of that extra help. We have a lot of people, as many of you do, working from home. So this has been a great offer to provide for them. We've had hundreds, in fact, now we're up into the thousands of responses to this Ergo Toolkit saying, hey, I need help. And Schneider also provides actually a coupon where these people that are working from home specifically can purchase furniture. They're given X amount of dollars. They get to go shopping and pick out an adjustable height desk or a human scale type desk, a new chair, etc. And boy, people are really flocking to that. So obviously there's a big need. And then the third category is our services employees, people that don't work at a site. They go to a customer site, they have to lug their toolbox, they have to carry big breakers and all sorts of crazy things. They're rolling them across uneven ground, etc. So we created an industrial athlete toolkit as well, where they can, scan a code, go to a website, get some training, get some stretches, click on that fancy little button that says need help, and we will respond to them one-on-one and give them some coaching and help give them some help to get through their issue. And at times that means referring them on, for medical treatment, but more often than not, we're catching it early, and so we're able to give them some help. So all these tools help any safety manager that doesn't have that direct day-to-day contact with their employees, because not all of our employees are located at a site. A lot work from home and out in the field.
I love those suggestions, and I really appreciate that you said, don't feel like you have to start with certain tools, particularly if you're early in your journey, right? This notion that the simplest tools are the best ones and the ones most likely to be implemented. And you gave us a whole host of ones, and folks who are thinking about embarking on this journey, a whole host of potential tools to choose from. We are starting to get a great deal of questions from the audience, so I will just say, please do continue to submit them, and maybe we can actually wrap up this portion and then spend the back half of our time hearing from some of those audience questions. So perhaps to wrap us up, I can ask all of you one final question. We know that MSD solutions are an ever-evolving journey, right? Some folks are early in that journey, some folks haven't even started. So maybe I can just ask each of you to take a minute or so to share with our audience, what changed at your company? What changed at your company to tackle MSD injury risks? And what are you most proud of around that change? So maybe we can hear from Kevin first, and then we'll go to Kathy, and then we'll round it out with Blake.
Okay, thanks, Malcolm. I would say first, and I'm very proud our company just signed the Msd Pledge. And I think that's a great first start, right? Because you have to go to your upper management, talk to them about the support, human resources. So I think that I'm proud that our company was stepped up to the plate immediately and was one of the first to sign that pledge. The other things that, and Kathy was talking earlier, it made me, I was going to say, insurance companies, a third of all our claims, 1 out of every 3 claims is MSD soft tissue related. right? So I say that because what I'm proud of is really what we've been able to deliver to our policyholders, to my customers, or as an insurance company, a lot of businesses like yours. And what they are is leading technology solutions related to MSD solutions. And that would be, so we now have ran a pilot for 5 years, and we're seeing a 70% reduction in at-risk behaviors related to lifting based off one of our wearables programs. So I'm really proud about that. Providing phone apps similar to the visual that Blake gave you of the person working with the green, red, and yellow apps, providing that to our policyholders, our customers. And then the other one that we actually just had made, developed, paid for is a virtual reality training that actually has people lifting, proper technique, with supervisors yelling at them to do things faster. So it's a really immersive experience. So long story long, Malcolm, is I'm proud about the cutting edge technology that we're really starting to introduce to the industry, and we're able to provide to, I would say, the average size American business out there to help them maybe get a little bit ahead of the curve where they wouldn't be able to traditionally.
I love that. Kathy, maybe we can go to you next.
All right. And Kevin, that was a great answer. And it's interesting because you're certainly coming from a different perspective than an individual company is. So I appreciate hearing that. I think for Schneider, or for me, I think their telling moment was when they came out in 2007, as I already mentioned, and said the most anybody can lift is 26 pounds, because that was unheard of back then. And that was the start of our journey where we recognized, okay, they are serious about this. But I'm going to cheat and say a second defining moment, not to be self-serving, but when they finally identified a brand new role, they created a role for somebody to actually take over ergonomics and figure out what in the world's going on at all the plants and develop some strategy. They just started doing that in 2020, roughly 2021, I guess. But that is a big step to create a job in a time and age right now where we're not creating new jobs. In fact, companies are cutting jobs. I think that really tells me that they're ready to take that step. And then again, as Kevin said, just allowing us to get into this Msd Pledge, and knowing that we're going to have to share some personal information. We're going to have to really drive ourselves to decrease those injuries. So.
Thanks, Kathy. And Blake, for you, company change that you're most proud of?
Yeah, similar to both Kevin and Kathy, I mean, Velocity HS is very proud to be part of the MSD Solutions Pledge. So, absolutely that is something really is important. But maybe from a Velocity HS's standpoint, we've always felt that we're focused on improving the lives of the global working population. That's always been our purpose. And the ability to introduce technology to help us provide that to more and more people. Back in the days pre-technology, it was very time consuming and not very scalable. But with this type of technology, we can make it easier for people to deploy, standardize it, and we can help out more and more people across the globe with their goals of trying to reduce MSD risk and on all the negative consequences of that.
Thank you, all three of you. I heard technology, I heard the MSD Pledge, I heard this 26-pound limit, and then the creation of a formalized role focused on ergonomics as some of the things that you're proud of. Again, an additional set of things that other companies can take home with them as they think about implementation of these types of strategies in their own workplaces. Well, wonderful. I am sure we could continue this conversation for ages, but let me just say thank you to Kevin and Kathy and Blake for sharing your perspectives. You're not done though. We're going to keep you for just a little bit more time. So now I want to transition into hearing a little bit from all of you. But before we get into the Q&A, we have just a couple of short questions for all of you to kind of help drive the conversation. So we're going to put up a couple of polls. We'll put up that first one now. And I think the question there is, which stage best describes your company's MSD solutions plan? You should see that pop up. Great. And you can see some of the suggested answers for that first question. We do not have an MSD solutions plan in place. We're learning about how we can get it started. We're preparing to implement an MSD solutions plan. We have some systems in place to prevent MSD injuries, and we're eager to implement new ideas. We have a robust MSD solutions plan in place, or we have a robust plan in place and are looking forward to sharing our learnings with others. And then the second question, how often does your organization conduct MSD hazard assessments? You can see those suggested answers on screen: continuously, annually, 1 to 2 years, when the job process changes, when an employee need arises after an injury, or maybe you don't do this at all. So we'll give you a moment to answer each of those questions if you wouldn't mind doing so. I'll say 10 or so more seconds, and we'll take a look at the answers. Okay, I think we're going to be closing up this poll shortly. There it goes. And we'll just quickly take a look at the answers. So there's some parity across both of these questions. It looks like for the first question, oh, I lost the answers, but hopefully we'll be able to, no, there we go. So they're back. So this first question, looks like most of you said we have some systems in place to prevent and respond to MSD injuries, and we're eager to implement new ideas. And you can see what the breakdown is around the rest of those. A good chunk of you also don't have any plan in place, and you're looking to learn how to get started. For the second question, how often does your organization conduct MSD hazard assessments? It's great to see that for a plurality of you, it's continuous and ongoing. But there are folks for whom it seems like it happens when an employee need arises, or maybe you don't conduct ergonomic hazard identifications at all. Good for us to know and good for us to take into account as we continue to put forth programming as a part of this ongoing effort by NSC and all of the folks involved in the MSD Solutions lab. So thank you. Thank you for answering those questions, and stay tuned because you're probably going to hear some more based on the answers that you gave today. Okay, so with all of that in mind, let's now spend a little bit of time hearing from all of you in the audience. So thank you to everyone who submitted some of those questions, and maybe we can just start to jump into a few of those questions. So this is a question from Larry Duke for all speakers. Are ergonomics teams key in your company or the companies you work with in solving MSD issues? And what is the typical makeup of your ergonomics teams? So I'll throw that out to anyone who might want to answer.
I'll be glad to answer that. Our ergonomics teams, we actually have a like a format set up that we expect the sites to follow. Obviously, the key thing to me is you've got to have an engineer on the team, somebody that thinks like an engineer, has that mechanical ability. So when I, who am not an engineer, come up with a crazy idea, they can figure out, you know, how can we do that? The ergonomics team needs to have a variety of people on there, including safety, engineering, and then obviously people from the site and from the plant. Because if you don't get their engagement, no matter what fancy thing you put in, they're not gonna like it unless they have been part of that process. But there's all sorts of elements of an ergo team. You need to have minutes. You should be posting what your before and after pictures are, you know, what your completed projects are and things like that. So.
Yeah, we have obviously totally agree with everything Kathy said, and just from the view of dealing with a lot
You're
of
on mute.
No, we can hear you. We can hear you. I can hear you, Kevin.
That threw me off. Now I lost my train of thought.
I'm happy to chime in for a bit here.
Go ahead.
Kevin, we'll bounce back to you. You know, the makeup of your ergo team somewhat depends upon, you know, where you are in that ergo maturity journey. I say a lot of times, or I see a lot of times, groups that are just starting out have a very, you know, standard type of ergo team with, you know, members from different areas of the facility, engineers, maintenance, etc. As it starts to mature, just as Kathy had mentioned, you start to engage people that have maybe different backgrounds, more and more engineers, maybe transition into other types of initiatives like Six Sigma or Lean or other types of continuous improvement. So it really doesn't matter. There are some key people you want, someone who can make that change and has budget. And eventually, some of the best ergo teams that I've seen don't involve anyone from environmental health and safety or ergonomics. They live in another area and it just becomes part of business. But you can start anywhere and it can adapt over time.
And I would just add that as we see looking across thousands of different businesses, different sizes, we do fundamentally see more success in the ergonomic team concept. But to Blake's point, that could be 2 people, 3 people. It's really who has the budget and who has the authority and who can take action and who understands the issues that need to be out there. But totally agree with Kathy on the engineering critically involved. But that brings that buy-in in that team concept. So just to support everything Kathy and Blake are saying, we have seen that vehicle of a team makes it more effective, which I think most people would agree on the call. Really anything you want to tackle, a lot of times the team approach is going to get that buy-in.
I love all of those answers. And I really appreciate, Kevin, that you just made buy-in a point of emphasis. And this leads to my next question, which comes from Emily Liano Lay, which is, and again, this is for anyone who might want to answer, how do you justify the return on investment for investing in the technology that so many of you spoke about, the higher management, right? How do you get them to say, this is a worthwhile investment in this technology to prevent these injuries?
Yeah, I'm happy to address that first. One is you have to be able to identify the value and ensure that value aligns with the value of your stakeholders. And then, there's typical buckets of value. It could be having a standardized approach. It could be having a consistent risk assessment tool. A lot of times I hear the value of technology comes in consistent, high quality data. Okay. And you're using that technology to answer a question that you can't answer without using the technology. So it's more so on the quality of data, the consistency of it, but there's also impacts on things like resources, time, as well as scalability.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo everything Blake just said and would say when we're dealing with a lot of companies from more of a consultant standpoint as an insurance company, we will typically lead with the business, how it lifts the business, right? So does it increase production, right? Right. What I'm sure is most of our participants on the call today are dealing with labor shortages, right? So if you have X number of injuries, how's that hurt production? So I think anytime you can tie it back into the overall revenue of the company, that's going to be a very big wedge for you.
Absolutely. Almost every ergonomic improvement also improves quality in some way, efficiency, productivity, improves morale, decreases turnover. I mean, we grasp at straws sometimes to justify something, granted, but we'll pull in everything. But a really simple one is, well, somebody got hurt on this job last year and it was a $500,000 claim. So have some transparency in those numbers with your upper management. And a lot of times they're like, oh, I had no clue that claim costs that much money, because they don't often look at those specific details.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Kathy. It made me think about specific to even construction companies and the idea of really understanding, and if you're in the industry, but understanding that because you can really leverage experience modification to get your things done right.
Absolutely.
Because in the construction world, if your EMOD is over, a certain level, you're not getting contracts. And so really aligning that value, as Blake said, can really help you, I think, to get some of this stuff implemented in your organizations.
I love
one of the often overlooked benefits of ergonomics and MSD risk reduction is equity and inclusion.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, ergonomics is equity and inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's such a wonderful point that you've made, Blake, around the fact that this is the equitable pathway forward for businesses. And then Kathy and Kevin, leading with the business case is so important, right? We're talking about corporations at the end of the day. And so if you lead perhaps with that business case, but you always make sure that you tie in the fact that this is the equitable way to go about business, I think that's a really great way to make this a valuable pitch as you're making it to the folks internally at your companies. We could continue this conversation for hours, but it turns out that we're just a couple of minutes away from the bottom of the hour, and I don't want to keep folks for too long. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who submitted a question. They were super, super thoughtful. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get to everyone, but thank you for submitting them. And then Kevin, Kathy, and Blake, thank you all for your time today and for all of the work that you all do. Really, really illuminating, and I think really, really helpful for so many businesses out there. Before we close, I just want to pass the mic back to Corinne, who's going to share a bit about the Msd Pledge that you've heard about today, some of the Msd Pledge member resources, as well as some upcoming events. So Corinne, back over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Malcolm, and for leading such a great panel in the Q&A, and extra thanks yet again to Kevin, Kathy, and Blake for joining us. Before we go, I would like to share the resources available to all of you. These resources are meant to be tailored to the business community, targeting diverse audiences from CEOs to employees. Our newest resource is a conversation guide for managers, and it offers examples and guidance in leading caring conversations, which foster a culture of safety through 4 key opportunities. One is learning from your employees directly about MSD risks on the job. Second, training and educating team members on MSD solutions. Third is addressing mistakes on the job. And finally, discussing MSD injuries with employees. You can find this resource plus additional resources at nsc.org/MSD under the resource tab. We have also shared a link to that resource in the chat, and you're actually getting a preview to that conversation guide. It's not yet up on the website, but it will be there shortly. So follow that link for today and then continue to look back. We are creating these resources regularly and adding them to the web. In addition to the resources, there are future events that your organizations are invited to join over the coming months. You can pre-register for any of these coming events by completing the poll on your screen. We have monthly new member orientations, with the next one coming up Thursday, August 25th. And we have another member orientation Thursday, September 29th. We also host regular educational events, such as today, with leading experts speaking on topics related to MSD prevention. Our next educational event will be our MSD Small Business Summit coming up Thursday, October 13th at 1 o'clock Eastern. Also next month, we do want to hope that we'll see many of you in September at the 2022 NSC Safety Congress and Expo in San Diego. Please, again, pre-register for any of the upcoming events and request information about NSC Safety Congress and Expo by completing the poll on your screen. I'm excited to share that one of the upcoming events at Congress is the Green Cross Celebration, which will be Tuesday evening, September 20th from 6 to 10 p.m. This event raises critical funds to support the National Safety Council's mission to save lives and prevent injuries from the workplace to any place, while celebrating the best and the brightest in safety. Philanthropic support of that event enables NSC to keep people safe throughout their everyday lives, both on and off the job, which would not be possible without support from our sponsors. It's going to be an exciting evening aboard the USS Midway Museum with special guest appearances, fireworks, and more. If you are interested in attending or have any questions, please contact Vicki Verboom with our development team. Her contact information is listed on the slide you can see. We look forward to catching you at one of these opportunities. As we wrap up today's event, I'd like to encourage you all once again to visit nsc.org/MSD Pledge to learn more, and please join the pledge. If you're interested in need more information, you'll have the opportunity to indicate that as well at the website. We hope you'll enjoy us in this important work. Thank you all for your continued support. We hope that you found today's session educational and look forward to seeing you at upcoming events. Have a great afternoon.